How's it going, folks? I'm Kowalski. This is Prairie Fire, and today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about cattle, like you see behind me, and a little bit about corn and tomatoes, and discuss a little bit about environmental impact and economic realities. So, to put some production numbers into perspective, each one of these cows produces a calf. Each one of those calves are worth about $1,500. And because of where I'm at here in central Nebraska, it takes roughly 10 acres to support one cow-calf pair for the entire season. Number 17, what do you want? They know who's in charge. So right now, I am standing on what is basically marginal ground in central Nebraska. Up there where the ground gets a little higher, you can see corn stalks. That is about 250 bushel to the acre corn, but down here it's just pasture. So you might be wondering, why didn't you guys just develop this whole thing into a cornfield? And the reality is you kind of can't. Now here in central Nebraska, a pasture like this is actually pretty productive. We get a decent amount of rainfall, around 30 to 36 inches a year. That's going to bring you a decent amount of grass. You can see there's a decent amount of trees, good for windbreaks. It's good for other wildlife as well. Now, most of America's rangeland is located between the center of the Great Plains states, so the Dakotas, Nebraska, Kansas, the Oklahoma Panhandle, Texas Panhandle, west to about the Continental Divide. This area is known as the Rocky Foothills. It gets between 12 to 20 inches of rain a year, so not enough rain to actually grow most types of crops except for maybe wheat. Even then, it's not going to be that great. Or if you happen to be in one of the river valleys, you could probably do irrigation. Although there has been a phenomenon in a lot of the western side of Kansas and Oklahoma called 0 day, where the groundwater runs dry because they've overexploited their water resources. So probably wasn't the best use of their non-renewable water resources. Like mother, like son. These critters are ready for winter. Now, I've heard the argument made that cattle are inefficient. It is insane that we waste so many resources on them. But I would argue that it is more or less a reflection of our labor constraints. Cattle are a very robust creature. They're hardy in the winter. They're pretty good in the summer, even in the heat. They usually can find water and stay hydrated. They're also very durable. Aside from a mountain lion, there aren't many predators in central Nebraska or in the western part of the state that can realistically threaten a healthy cow. So they're kind of labor relaxed. I'm not saying ranchers don't work, they definitely do. My herd is only 25, so this is more of a hobby or just a way to make use of this land resource that we have. I do not make my full living off of the cattle. I am a farmer. I will call myself a farmer before a rancher. It's what I identify with. It's just having these cows fits a certain niche given the resources we have. So I have 25 cows, which means I will need about 250 acres worth of grass to feed them. I do not have that much pasture, so over the winter I will actually just put them out onto corn stalks where they will graze, and if we get a lot of snow, I'll take them hay, which we put up a fair amount. It's also important to keep in mind the length of a growing season. Here in central Nebraska, half of the year, plants aren't really growing, except for grass. Grass is the most durable. It will grow about 7 months out of the year. The other 5 months, it cannot grow. There's not enough sunlight, it's too cold, and the ground is frozen. Why is it then most of our food to table agriculture is based in Southern California and places like Florida and Texas? Doesn't freeze. There's also more sunlight over the winter. These are environmental conditions that can only be replicated up here in greenhouses. So, unless we start investing in a massive greenhouse project, don't expect a lot of food to table agriculture to be moving to the Midwest. It's not practically feasible. Now, as you move more towards the eastern side of the Midwest or up by the Great Lakes region, you might actually get more food to table seasonally, but they also have more people, which means they have more laborers to actually do less mechanized agriculture. So you really have to keep in mind the water, the land, the temperature, and the population availability, because if you do not have all of these things, some forms of agriculture are just frankly impractical. I would argue livestock, particularly cattle, can basically be done anywhere in the world. And today, where do we see it mostly concentrated? On the marginal lands, where there is very little population. All right, so let's crunch the numbers real quick between the use of land for cattle, corn, and tomatoes. So my cows require about 10 acres for the cow-calf pair. I have 25 of them, so we'll have a baseline of 250 acres. If I have 25 calves and I go to sell them, I'm going to get probably close to $1,500 for each. So that's about $37,000, give or take. The market will just vary. Now, that's not including inputs or anything, that's just selling them. Now, let's talk corn. In this county, you can expect about 200 bushels to the acre. At about $4 a bushel across 250 acres, you're looking at about $200,000. That's significantly more than the equivalent for the cows. Now, there's also inputs there. It'll all depend, but just keep in mind that is how much money is generated for the crop being produced. Now switch it over to tomatoes. If you had in Southern California, because we can't grow tomatoes here, the climate's not built for it, but let's say you had 250 acres of tomatoes, each acre you would expect to get about $5,000 for. So that's over $1 million. It's like $1.2 million. So clearly, we should all be planting tomatoes, right? Well, no, that's not possible. I can't even grow corn out here. The ground's not suitable for it. So when people are saying something to the effect of farmers are wasting resources by growing livestock, um, that doesn't really make sense. Did you consider if there's enough rainfall? Did you consider if the soil is there for it? Is there even the population for it? Because those tomatoes cost that much per acre because it requires people to hand pick them. At least with corn, it's mechanized, and with cattle, the cattle kind of take care of themselves. I mean, you might have to protect them from a predator every so often or maintain the fences. You gotta, break ice for them in the winter. But on the whole, cows take care of themselves, cereal grains are mechanized. It's that real labor intensive stuff that has the highest payouts, but you can only do that in Southern California, not just because they have the proper climate for it, but because they actually have the manpower to make it possible. All right, forgot to mention this when I filmed all the other clips, but something to keep in mind with that western rangeland is something needs to be grazing it. Otherwise, you will have a buildup of grass, and when the dry season hits, it would become a massive fire hazard. Now, prairie fires are good. When grazed grass is burned, it usually gets rid of overgrowth, it gets rid of the weeds, but if you have a buildup of grass and that catches on fire, you will end up with a very intense fire that is capable of even burning the organic matter in the soil. And that is not what you want. That is not good soil practice at all. The reason I keep focusing on agricultural policy decisions based on the reality of the labor, of the environmental conditions you have, of the practical realities of the world we live in, is because if you do not understand what is happening, you cannot properly advocate for a solution. The big issues, as I see it, are one, a lack of infrastructure and a lack of people. That's what we need to be investing in. I would say the United States across the Midwest and the Great Plains in particular, it's just what I'm more aware of. We need to be building greenhouses on a scale similar to what the Dutch have done. Because if we build large greenhouse complexes and combine that with high density homes, which could be subsidized or just really, really cheap, we could revitalize rural populations. We could rapidly diversify the production of what we make in these rural areas. And that would go a long way at revitalizing rural America. And it could be a template for other places around the world as well. The United States is not the only place experiencing rural flight. It's happening in Australia. It's happening in Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, Canada. All the great, big agricultural players have been seeing the same economic forces. We need to revitalize our small towns. We need to have the economic dynamism to ensure that our counties are not so reliant on just cereal, grain, and livestock. That is going to take a long time to do. I would argue we need to start soon. Greenhouses are a proven technology. You use less water, you use less insecticide because it's a controlled environment, you extend the growing season, and it can also provide a recreational space for the communities it's in depending on how you implement it. This is why I want it to be more community focused and ran like a local cooperative as opposed to just a money generating venture. Now, there are many other things to consider with livestock, and I will touch on those in a different video. But for now, I just wanted to discuss why we do certain agricultural policies the way we do them, and why that matters, and how that needs to shape the solutions you come up with. We do not want ranchers and farmers to be antagonistic towards a future that can benefit them, but you have to keep in mind the practical realities of today when coming up with your solutions. But that's it for now. I'll catch you on the next one. Say goodbye, 25. I've never been into hunting, which to some people watching this is probably going to irritate them because this is clearly some decent hunting ground, but I raise black Angus beef. Why would I want venison?